So, good afternoon, friends. Thank you for everyone to join today, and I hope everyone is keeping safe and taking precautions. As I hope like we'll be out of this tough times soon. And today we have with us is Mr. Utkarsh from Flatheads. Like he's the co-founder at Flatheads, and Flatheads is a all-day sneaker brand, and in no time they have created a niche in the footwear industry and are doing at a very impressive pace. And today we will be going to learn about how they have about their journey, like how they have started, and what are the various challenges they faced, and how they what are some of the tips and tricks they can suggest for all the players, for all the people who are in the D2C space, and some of the tricks about entrepreneurship will also ask. And at the end we'll be taking some questions as well, so anybody who has any questions, so they can put the question in the Q&A section, and hopefully we'll be able to answer a couple of questions as well at the end. So I would like to start with some question like about how you started Flatheads, and like what was the thought process and what was the journey. Maybe if you can share some of the things about this.
Okay, so I think obviously the business reasons are very clear. It's a country which is brand starved, and India, we don't see too many Indian brands here. Footwear, obviously, large space. Casual shoes itself is like more than $1 billion. So obviously all the reasons were there, but one of the key things which is sort of been my driver for starting this business was that I am personally interested in shoes. So over last 10-15 years, I have been collecting shoes. I have been looking at shoes. As an industrial designer, this has been one of my passion areas. I feel that any shoe that you wear, your feet will always cook in that shoe, whether it's a sports shoe, whether it's a casual shoe, or whether it's a formal shoe. There will be a difference. The way you feel on your body versus the way you feel on your feet, there is some difference. So I felt that the perfect comfortable shoe has not been made, and there is a lot of opportunity to innovate here. So that was one of the key drivers. Obviously, my co-founder Ganesh, he's a full-fledged business guy. So obviously, we asked all the right questions in terms of whether market is ready, whether market size is there, whether infra is there, and all that thing. But one of the key drivers is that we feel there is a lot to be done in terms of innovation around the footwear itself. What is the future of footwear is the question that sort of intrigues us all the time.
Yes. So even a person is all a foot like the shoes always tell a lot about the person itself, and whenever we meet a person, we definitely checks the shoes or the kind of shoes he or she is wearing, and that depicts a lot. And so coming on the competition landscape, like how like do you view the competition, and how do you how you have planned to stay ahead of the competition, and what are your future plans regarding this? Because there are a lot of players with deep pockets in the same industry, and like how do you plan to fight this in coming years to come?
So I think most D2C brands will have to battle with incumbents. Like if you take footwear, it's a mature industry. I mean, people have been wearing footwear for hundreds of years now. So it's a mature industry. There is already a bunch of brands who are there. Anybody who is within the casual footwear space is a competition for us. But the way we are looking at competition actually is slightly different. One is that if you look at casual shoes, okay, it's like today it's like above $1 billion in India itself, growing at 18 to 20%. So let's say today the new brands or the D2C brands that are there, these are like sub $1 million revenue. If we become like 100 times of this, 100x, or if we become 100 million in revenue also, that's like 700 crores or something like that. Even then, we will be taking only 5% of the 5% of the market share. So the way we see it is that there are going to be multiple players, and there is enough share of the pie to be there. So actually, we think that being able to identify the right customer, who is the perfect customer for our brand, searching that person and satisfying his needs is actually the mantra that we follow in terms of looking at the competition. Other than that, of course, competition keeps us on our toes, but in the D2C space, it also helps because as more competition comes, people are going to get more aware and they are going to get more quality conscious.
And if we talk about this pandemic, it has been a really tough time for many of us, and it has taken a huge toll on some of the brands. Like, how did you guys survive the pandemic, like the last lockdown and this year's lockdown? And what were the challenges you faced, and what kind of things did you do in this time?
So I'm not sure if we have survived or not because pandemic is still continuing. But I'll tell you a couple of interesting things we did. I think that being small at this point of time is actually a benefit for us, which means that our targets are not too large. So even if we drop like few hundred shoes are selling less, percentage wise, if you see, we would have dropped considerably. But in terms of quantum, we would not have suffered that kind of a hit. The second thing is that okay, the question is, if there is a pandemic, if there is a lockdown, you can't ship the shoes, or people don't want to wear the shoes. So then there are two things to do. Number one was we were trying to figure out in the new normal, what's the kind of shoe that people want to wear. So we actually came up with a concept called as the 2-mile shoe. 2-mile shoe is like, okay, it doesn't have a back, so you just slip into it like a mule, and then you can go. So actually, when we put out this shoe, we sold almost like 40 to 45% of our inventory in the pre-order itself. So that shows that there is scope for innovation in the new normal or in the pandemic itself. The second thing we did was, so one of the things is that you now have more time on your hands, and the operations challenges and some of them have gone down. So how can you use that time wisely? Actually, what we did was we used this to develop our supply chain, and we sampled with a lot of Indian suppliers. And very honestly, last lockdown, actually, we moved our supply chain entirely to India, and that's how I think we used the 2 to 3 month slack period in terms of making really a big value, getting some big value out of it.
Okay, and when we talk about supply chain entirely through India, how does it impact in the cost? Does the cost go up, or how much control do you have on hand? What are the various factors that you think when you say the entire supply chain is through India?
I think clearly there is a big advantage, especially for people who are looking at D2C apparel. So if you are let's say sourcing from Far East, China, Vietnam, or some of these countries, the first thing that is going to happen to you is that you have to pay freight on board. Freight on board means before the thing ships, you have to pay for the inventory. The second thing is it takes about 40 days if you are shipping by sea. It's not possible to ship by air because the cost is like it's going to be 6x or something like that. So when you're shipping by sea mode, it will take you almost 30 to 40 days for the shoes to reach, plus another 2 weeks for the customs clearance. So obviously that's the working capital cycle you are saving. The second thing is whenever you are doing India sourcing, I think control on quality, you asked about the control. I think control on quality is going to be high. Two reasons for that. One is that the contracts or the agreements that you have are significantly more enforceable here. I mean, if you want to try and sue somebody overseas, it's going to be a serious problem. And if it is China, then I think it is going to be like a multi-pronged challenge. So I think being able to enforce quality is very much possible. The India supply chain, actually, there are a bunch of people here who have been manufacturing for European clients and global clients. So they understand quality. It's not like they don't understand quality. In terms of unit economics, I think cost of procurement, you can expect some increase, 10 to 15%, but it will be easily offset by the duty that you are paying. In our category, for example, we pay almost 30 to 35% duty, anywhere between 25 to 35 based upon how you are importing and what's the cost of the shoe. So since that duty structure is not there, I think overall you save both on the cost, you get better quality, and the third thing is that from the day it is manufactured, within a day or two, it is ready for you. I mean, ready for you to inward into your warehouse and start shipping. It doesn't take those additional 40 days. So I think significant advantages in terms of having the supply chain out of India. I would advise that anybody is looking into this area or sectors which require manufacturing abroad, I would say local supply chain is a big boon.
So I think that sounds amazing. I think this is really going to give a lot of push in like building a self-dependent country, and I've seen this with various other B2C brands as well who have shifted their entire supply chain in India and or are building the capabilities in India itself through backward integration as well. And this is something really going to give a lot of push. And coming on that, like when you started Flathead, so like what was your G2M, like what was the go-to-market strategy that you have? How did you get your first 100 customers? And for anyone like who is starting up and who wants to start up, like what do you think like should be a G2 go-to-market strategy for anybody, and how they can get their first 100 or 1,000 customers?
So I think it will differ significantly from category to category. It will also differ from what kind of customer you are addressing. So I'll tell you our simple go-to-market strategy. So initially, the shoes that we were building, or when we started Flatheads, we were actually building for the work tribe. Work tribe means all the young professionals, in India. So very simply put, what we were actually trying to build was a set of casual shoes that you can wear for 12, 13, 14 hours. And you can wear it at the workplace. You can also wear it beyond the workplace, like if you want to go to a coffee shop or if you want to go to a pub. So when we started, our GTM was actually very simple. We reached out to a bunch of entrepreneurs in our network, and these were people like people who have really made it successful. Naveen Tiwari from then there was Sahil Barua, there was Pankaj Chadda from Zomato. So these were some of the people from our network. So we reached out to them, and we said that can you sort of try it out and give us a tweet or give us a post kind of thing. Of course, they bought the shoe. Number one was, okay, as a fellow entrepreneur, they bought the shoe. The second thing is, when they really liked it, they gave a good critical appreciation of the product. Obviously, there was good followership. Obviously, they are leading large corporations today or large startups today. So based upon that, I think we didn't, not 100, but we got our first 500 customers. So that was one of the go-to markets we did. We also, for our first 100 customers, we went and hand delivered ourselves. Not only we hand delivered, but at the same time, we took a small video along with the surprise of the customer, and then we used that on our social media feed. So there is like hundreds of hacks you can do in terms of both storytelling and in terms of approaching your early customers.
Okay. And if you can like tell us a little bit about like how do you measure any metrics or track any metrics in your business, and what are some things that like is it the number of customers, or is it the number of is it revenue, like what is the core for your business?
Yeah, so I think I will tell you, of course, what are the metrics that we are measuring. But right now, if you ask me, the main two things that we are measuring is, number one, we are measuring growth. We are in the growth phase. So are we getting so we have set a target for ourselves, 20% month on month in terms of sales. And so this is the first metric that I always look at whenever I'm coming. Beyond that, there are two sides to the story. One is the financial metrics, or how the company is performing. The first thing is, of course, GMV. Like I said, we are in the growth, so GMV. The second thing is CAC, and this ratio, I think every entrepreneur should write in his mind very clearly. Successful businesses are the ones which have low CACs. CAC stands for customer acquisition cost. Beyond that, we of course measure the contribution margin. So level 1, which is net of marketing, level 2, which is after discounts, level 3, which is after direct costs like fulfillment, logistics and things like that, and finally whether you are getting the required product margin or not. So this is like the tiered structure on the metrics. On the other side, I try to measure two things. It's little difficult to measure. One is that how much evangelism or how much net promoter is happening around your product or your brand. So there is no way to sort of metricize this or automate it, but simple things like how much engagement your posts are getting, what kind of feedback you are getting on your customer support helpline. Can you reach out and randomly at the end of the month reach out to, let's say, 25 customers or 100 customers and check what kind of rating they would give you? So these are some of the other qualitative things that we measure on the other side. A few secondary metrics also. Website conversion, number one. So if you're paying and driving the traffic to your website, how much percentage of that is converting? That's an important secondary thing. Average order value. We also track, a couple of important things we track is the number of exchanges and returns. So this is like a key metric for any D2C brand. So if you are in the apparel space, apparel retail, so exchanges and returns will, if it goes beyond a certain point, then you will have to really, either you will have to work on the sizing or you'll have to work on the product itself. So roughly that's the kind of metrics we are tracking right now. Like I said, two most important. One is the growth percentage. Since we are in the early stage, growth percentage is very important for us, and cost of customer acquisition is very important. The day any entrepreneur, you as an entrepreneur, when you see that you are getting this growth like 20%, 30%, whatever your target is, and your CAC is not going up, I think that that is the point where you are going to be surprised, and you can say that you have found your product market fit and you are ready for scale.
I think that is something very interesting and informative as well. I think everyone will find really informative, and hope we also apply this same in our business as well. And another thing is like the discovery in today's time. Like, how is the discovery happening? Like, is it through social media, or is it through ads, or like is it through marketplaces? Like, what do you think? Like, where the discovery is happening for a D2C brand in a category like yours?
So I think so far we have been primarily performance marketing driven. Performance marketing meaning you are paying for the advertising, you're paying for your stories to be relayed on social media like Facebook and Instagram. So we have been focused on that. Marketplace gives you some visibility automatically, as in very simply put, you when you go to Amazon, you are going with the intent to buy. When you go to Instagram, you are actually going with the intent to just browse what your friends are doing, or just to express yourself. But when you're going to Amazon or any marketplace, you're going with the intent to buy. So obviously on marketplaces, discovery is a different ballgame. So there are some paid ways of getting there. But I think eventually all brands have to really focus on how they are accessing tribes, or how they are accessing already built up organic pockets of discovery. For example, if you take like a shoe brand like ours, can we collaborate with another brand? So we are doing that. Actually, we are collaborating with somebody who is making bags, and somebody who is making other kinds of apparel. And so can we share our customer bases? Because that is free, right? You don't have to pay for it. Same ways, you can take this from extension from collaborating with other brands to collaborating with personalities that are suitable. For example, like we did with entrepreneurs. So for the work tribe, entrepreneur is aspirational. Let's say for other set of people, maybe somebody who is in the music scene is quite aspirational. So can you team up with somebody to produce some kind of a collaborative discovery? So these are some of the ways that we are looking, at least in the apparel space. This is how I think we will grow. There are various other takes as well, but I just wanted to share like a couple of good associations that will open up organic pockets or organic tribes of customers for you.
So I also feel like the discovery, like nowadays, is not happening through Google searches and it's only happening through social media or word of mouth or some other platforms like Amazon, Flipkart. There are other channels like influencers and so for any D2C brand, because in today's time, SEO, through SEO, I don't think there is any business that is getting generated for the D2C brands.
So I think I will differ. For example, if you are in a category, so again it depends on category to category. So mostly for categories which are very impulse oriented. Impulse oriented means okay, you don't have to think too much before buying. Then I think SEO may not be so relevant. It will be more the influencer route or more the Instagram route. But let's say if you are making shoes that are like comfortable and you have got some material innovation in that, and you want to talk about that kind of a storytelling. So I think in that case, what happens is searches are also important. For example, somebody is searching for breathable shoes, then obviously Flatheads is going to appear at the top of his listing, and that's actually the customer we want. Somebody who is searching for lightweight shoes. For example, our shoes are like, they are below 400 grams for one pair. So those who are searching for these kind of things, I think are the right set of people. And the SEO actually will lead you to a lot of organic traffic, so you shouldn't miss that. Again, like I said, to your point, depends on the category. If you are in a category which is more impulse driven, I think it's more important to go the influencer route, or let's say icon or celeb route. But if it is an involved purchase and there is some amount of product functionality that somebody is looking, definitely SEO is going to give you some benefit as well.
Okay, great. And we have a lot of questions. Like, how do you handle return and exchange? Like, what is the ideal return or exchange percentage in footwear's category?
See, there is nothing like ideal. Ideal is zero. If nobody returns, that's like we are going to be really happy. But take an industry average. For example, we see that if we go to marketplaces and look at the numbers, 30% is supposed to be an average. So we are able to. So for us, we are trying to keep it in single digits. So right now we are below 10%. We hover somewhere between 9 to 10% kind of exchanges. And less than 5% of returns. Two reasons for that. I think, okay, so how do you control it? I think number one is that be very, very sharp on what you are listing in the catalog. Make sure that the pictures are really, high quality. Quality of the listing really matters. Quality of your catalog really matters. Most of the time, people return the product because it doesn't look like what you have shown them. So if they are able to, what you see is what you get, then number one, your returns are going to come down. Number two, give them enough guidance in terms of, how many centimeters this is, how much width is there. So give a proper detailed size chart. Again, returns will be less. In our category, or, the kind of shoes that we are making, we have one additional secret recipe. So we make knit shoes, knit fiber. So knit fiber, it allows for some amount of stretch. So it almost covers like half a size. It's almost like a t-shirt. So, if it is slightly half a centimeter here or there, it's not going to matter. So because we don't have any kind of padded or we don't have any kind of cut and sew kind of shoes, and our upper is completely knit. That's why we are further lower in the exchange and the return kind of situation.
That's nice to hear. Because in today's time, that is a very big problem for anybody who is in the apparel or footwear industry. Because the major of the thing is it's a sizing issue that they have.
Yeah, so sizing issue I think can be handled very easily especially if you have got good control in the supply chain and you have the proper product design team with you. Then I don't think you will have sizing issues. Only if you are in the if you are primarily like a trading based kind of brand, which means you are buying off the shelf from a manufacturer. The manufacturer is sort of designing, making everything, and you are just picking it up. So lots of people who are marketplace led brands, or who are primarily in the trading oriented. So these this is the situation for them. The other problem in sort of getting into a trading kind of situation is also that the same product other seller will also have, or other brand will also have. So it's like, okay, product A, one brand sticker will be there, product B, another brand sticker will be there, but it is the same product. So in such a situation, obviously lowest price wins, and that's actually a very bad positioning for a early stage kind of a company to be in.
And another thing is like about marketplace versus the your own store or your own sales channel. Like which way which one should proceed, and what is your take on this? Like whether we should have a marketplace first approach or a D2C first approach.
So once again, I think so it depends on what is the behavior of the customer you are targeting. For example, very simply put, somebody who is going to marketplace and browsing 1,000 products that are existing today. If you go on Myntra, you will find that okay, there are more than 5,000 shoes are out there. So obviously, if you go to Amazon, you will find a significant amount of product listings that are there. So what is the customer interested in? If the customer is interested in a very good bargain or super good value for money, then it's probably, if you're competing in that kind of space, then maybe marketplace first will apply for you. I mean, if you have some ways of cutting the cost, or if you have the ability to buy large volumes or large quantities and you are able to beat other people at the price, then maybe that's a good strategy. If you are somebody who is best in class, actually, in my opinion, what is the evolution is that marketplaces are already there. They were the first to come into e-commerce. Beyond that, there were vertical players, people like Myntra, who are fashion specific or particular type of thing. And then now is the third range where D2C. So D2C emergence basically says that you are something which is best in class, or you have a unique product, unique positioning, and you have a story to tell. So I think for a D2C brand, it's very important to be able to tell the story. And hence, at least the way we went to market is that we went our website first, or our own channel first. Even today, we are quite dominant on our channel. We are 80% on our channel itself, and 20%. So 20%, who are this 20%? This 20% are people who are worried that okay, Flatheads is a new brand, whether they are going to deliver or not. But same thing is like they will probably look at our website, they will understand our story, but then they will feel more comfortable putting their card details on Amazon. So to cater to them, of course, marketplace is a good channel and it helps a lot. But I think for a D2C brand, even if they go onto the channels of marketplaces, I think very important to have A+ kind of content and have a brand store itself within the marketplace. So that will allow you to explain your value proposition significantly better.
Okay. And next is like, what are your current challenges? Like, what exactly is still a challenge for you, and so you are still struggling, or you are trying to solve right now?
So I think for us, there are two challenges. One is that we are in a category which is where the repeats are not high. So number one, how to get repeats. We have been quite successful in that area. Actually, 25% of our customers have repeated. Normally, somebody expects that people will buy one shoe in 8 months or something like that. But we have seen customers coming back, about 20-25% of them coming back and buy within 3 to 4 months. So this is one of the challenges: how to increase, or how to make that we are the default shoe to go to. And this will remain, I think, one of our biggest challenges. Other than that, I think one more challenge that we face is that some of the unique products, requires a lot of capital investment. For example, if you want to make a mold, then it can cost almost like 20 to 30 lakhs for having a. So for every shoe, if you want to create a mold, then there is a capital requirement. And as long as volume is high, then it's okay. But if you are producing for a low volume, then the amortization over, let's say you are producing 10,000 shoes. So then cost of shoe is going to increase per shoe. So how to bring new products at the same time keep the capital lock lower. So this is one of the challenges that we are battling as of now. But yeah, okay. Hopefully, I think we will be able to resolve some of these very soon.
And we have a question from the audience also. Like, what are the factors you consider while pricing your product, right? Especially for an Indian consumer or for people living in India.
So I think one of the approach that any entrepreneur should take is, try to understand what's the value perception in the minds of the customer. So how much value do they attribute to comfortable shoes, lightweight shoes, or natural fiber based breathable shoes? And you should try to reach that threshold where customer will convert properly, and otherwise they are going to fall down to the next best alternative. So my opinion is that being able to find the exact threshold, that okay, above this it's out of my consideration set because it's way beyond my budget. Below this it is falling in the general category, which means that I can go and benchmark with other 100 brands and buy from there. So what's the right threshold of the value quotient is something that you will have to figure out with a lot of trial and error. There is no secret sauce to it. It's a trial and error kind of a thing. You can do enough product focus groups, you can do enough consumer research and all that thing, but you will have to do a direct, you'll have to actually sell at different prices to figure out what's the right price point at which a lot of customers are buying or they are accepting this particular. So answer is very simple: value from the eyes of the customer. And how to find that value? Put out at various price points and check where you are getting the spike in the volume. That's probably the price at which acceptance is being found for it.
And does discounting play any role in pricing? Like, for example, many brands do a high MRP and then put a discount on that.
So I think discounting is a phenomenon, and it's a phenomenon that is driven primarily by people who tried to move retail from offline to online. And the very simple way of telling was that come to online, it is cheaper, there is discount. So somewhere in the minds of the customer now it is sort of rooted that I have to get some kind of a discount. So I think that discount at the right time and in the right amount is important. But if you are a discount led brand, then that's a different dynamic altogether. I mean, there are some brands who are saying that okay, I'm like available always on discount. So that's a different route and they have different business model altogether. But I think for D2C brand who's trying to build a premium brand, discount is important at the right time and through different sources like couponing or genuinely giving some discount at right points. For example, when customers opportunity to buy is higher, let's say we do some very unique things. For example, we do payday sale. Payday sale means okay, when you get your salary, you have some opportunity to buy some few things that are satisfying for you. So at this point, if you are able to get like a little bit extra, I'll say that okay, I have the money also. At the same time, there is a brand who is saying that okay, here's a payday sale. So some kind of relevant discounting is very, very important. Otherwise, if you are always on discount, then there is a problem. You'll be perceived as a discount brand, and then people will only remember you as such. So it's a double-edged sword. You have to play it, but you have to play it carefully.
Great. And like, what are like your next what is the future plans, or like how you plan to expand from now?
Okay, so I think where we are going is, so we have 2 or 3 axes for growth. Number one is on the materials play. We are quite bullish on the materials play. So we are looking for better materials which are not necessarily expensive, but they give you the necessary comfort, they give you the necessary look. So we are putting some amount of significant investment in this area. The second thing is we are also trying to build some culture or aspiration into our shoes. So what is the young customer today is seeking, what kind of associations they are making, and how would they like to project themselves. So this is some of the studies that we are conducting through both through observation based, both through lots of interviews that we are doing with the customers. And to some extent our story is going to be like, we are going to have one or two signature lines which are very, very strong technical products, which means they deliver very strongly to their promise. At the same time, we are going to have very short bursts of short volume culture-led associations, which means that whatever is trending today, for example, if superhero movies are trending today, then you will have a different line. But once that trend is over, the new trend emerges, we should be able to launch in smaller quantities for this kind of limited edition. So that's the way we are looking at. We are also looking at some amount of adjacent categories, and we have got some inbounds from overseas, which is like the global market. So that's another area for expansion for us.
Okay. So I was
like
just coming
make in India for the world kind of story.
Okay. Mention like whether they have reached this. I think my internet is hello.
Yeah, Gaurav, I think I couldn't hear your question.
So I'll just repeat. So I was saying like many brands like when they reach at a certain threshold, so they feel like they should go international. And so that is what my question was, like when a brand should consider like that they should go international, or they should have some start building their international capabilities or cross-border capabilities.
Yeah, so I think cross-border is a very very important factor. Whenever you are building a brand, number one, you should check whether that has any kind of global relevance. So if that has a global relevance, then from the very initial phases itself, you should start looking at whether you can expand globally. And it's not necessary to go full scale. I think some amount of experimentation is going to be part and parcel of this. So for example, in our case, we are not a very old brand, we are a new brand, but we represent the contemporary design of the footwear. For example, materials innovation in footwear. This is a global phenomenon and it has global relevance. So what is the trade-off? The trade-off here is that you are trying to serve different markets, and that is going to increase the complexity of your operations very, very high. It's going to make the complexity very high. So carefully you should look at the most relevant, and you should do some amount of low-cost pilots to prove whether such a relevance is there or not. And if relevance is there, then obviously you can, if you see a little bit of success, then you can double down on that and you can go towards scale into those particular markets. So actually what we are doing is, we have got inbound from some of the footwear marketplaces in the US, and so we are actually partnering with them to take our product to the US market. And then if it works well, then obviously we will expand again to Canada, Mexico, and South America, which is that belt. And as much as we can serve from the single warehouse, we will try to.
So I think it makes sense also, and with the pandemic, like everything is becoming global, and true globalization will happen, I think, now after the pandemic.
Yeah, so globalization can give you some protection also. For example, we already know that in the US, schools are starting to reopen. Most of the people are already vaccinated, and they have lifted. Some of the states have given that they don't need to wear masks also. So obviously you can see the recovery in the Western markets, but that kind of recovery is probably, let's say 4 months away or 3 months away in our country. So obviously globalization will give you some amount of protection, but please understand that there is a capital involved, and there is a cost to it. And again, it's going to challenge you tremendously in terms of the operations complexity that will.
You're right. Also, we have another question. Like, do you think like the augmented reality is something that can help in the online shoe industry or apparel industry, or do you have plans to implement that in?
No, yes, we have
months?
plans. We think that augmented reality, virtual reality are technologies which are going to impact not only apparel retail but retail in general, the ability of a customer to be able to perceive your product in a more high fidelity manner is going to give better decision and obviously more conversion. So we feel that these are some of the technologies that will come, but I honestly feel that the cost of implementing this technology right now is sort of the barrier. Just like today, if you really see why D2C brands are sort of mushrooming. It's mushrooming because 2 or 3 reasons. Number one, customers' buying behavior has changed. Amazon has put 20 years into telling the customer that, hey, buy, no problem. Flipkart has spent 15-20 years to do this. The second thing is that a lot of the infrastructure and the technology is built out too. Like for example, at Shipway, you are providing probably you are taking care of one particular area, and anybody who is like a new startup can come reach out to Shipway and say that, okay, can you manage the operations and the logistics for us, and you will say thumbs up. So these kind of partnerships are possible today. That is not happening in the VR AR space. There is nothing ready that I can say plug and play. So when the point comes that it's almost plug and play is when this will take off. For now, very simple things can be done. For example, instead of AR VR, can you do like a video chat? So one of the features that we have put is that if you want to talk to our executive, you can actually click a button there, and instead of asking questions on WhatsApp, you can actually talk to that person. And they will show you the shoe and what is good and what is not good. You can ask the questions and then you can decide whether you want to buy. So I think that before it hits AR and VR, I think there will be some in between transitionary phases before it goes there. Video is one of them.
Okay. I think we have 3-4 minutes left, so I will take 2-3 quick questions. So one is like, how do you handle complaints? Like, how do you handle complaints? You must be getting some complaints from the customers, maybe something they don't like.
Yeah, so we always believe that whatever shoes we are giving, that's like it's our shoe. So it's very it's like a matter of pride for us. So basically, if customer is unhappy, we have a returns period and an exchanges period and stuff like that. And if there is a manufacturing defect, of course, we ask for them to send us the pictures, and we can easily identify that if there is a manufacturing defect or something. So it's a no questions asked replacement kind of a policy. Actually, the question that D2C brand people should be asking is, how do you find out whether it's a genuine complaint or a fake complaint? Because in India, we find a lot of these situations, and then we have to be able to go back to them with a convincing answer and tell them that because of such and such a reason, we understand that you are trying to take advantage of us. So please don't do this. It's not nice. And so actually, the challenge is on the other side. It's like people who are trying to take advantage of you. How do you deal with those kind of things? Otherwise, for us, we have a strong policy in terms of what complaint should be addressed, and we are as proactive as possible. There are some cases, for example, can become very difficult. For example, in the pandemic now, you understand, Gaurav, right? How difficult it is to ship stuff to certain zones and certain pin codes and things like that. And obviously somebody has paid for it, or they have asked for it and they are waiting for it. So these are slightly dicey. I think a patient explanation. And number one thing is that if you are always there, like if somebody hits your WhatsApp button and you are replying on Saturday and Sunday, that gives a lot of that gives a lot of confidence to the customer. And I think 50% of the times when you give the reply saying that, okay, it's coming, it has reached this particular destination. Well, anyway, customer themselves can track it. But I think they are not looking primarily to complain. They are looking for some kind of assurance that brand is with me.
So yes, so basically they need some transparency, or you can say
transparency.
So then most of the customers are like happy with that, even if it is a delay. So if we could tell them like there is a delay, slightly delay from our end, so I think they are pretty much happy with that as well. Okay, and I think we are almost done with the time. I think if you can take 5 more minutes, if you have no issues with that, so we can take.
No, I'm fine. I'm open.
So
There are a few more questions. Quite a lot of attendees.
Question is, right. And how do you do you think we should invest in email marketing as well? Is it worth investing in email marketing?
I think email marketing works. So very simply put, I think the investment also is not very high. For example, when our shoes were dispatched and they were getting shipped here, so for almost 20 to 30 days we had put some teaser campaign, and we said that something interesting is coming. If you want to find out what is that interesting thing, please put your email address and we will reach out to you. So like that, almost before we launched, we had almost managed to collect 3,000 to 4,000 email IDs, and eventually when we launched, we had almost like a 8 to 10% conversion. So
Nice.
I think that email marketing works if it is done properly. I think all kinds of marketing works. It has to be done craftily. People are saying that, okay, in the middle of all this content, if it is some kind of interesting content, okay, they are really quirky, they are telling something nice, okay, I'll give my email address, let me see what they are going to bring. So there is obviously the curiosity of the customer, and if you can stimulate the curiosity of the customer, then email marketing can work wonders for you. If you are not able to stimulate, or if you are not able to catch the attention, then you are in the spam folder. Like you will become like an irritant for the customer.
Right. And another thing is everyone wants to know what is the minimum customer acquisition cost as well as the ROS. And I am sure it is dependent upon the business and not and on the category as well. But if you can help give an idea or some ratio of it.
So I think it not only depends on the category. I'm not sure if you guys are able to hear me. Can somebody just message saying that you are able to? Gaurav, you are able to hear me?
Yes. Now you are able to hear. Now
okay, fine. Okay, so I think that ROAS and CAC actually is not only dependent on category, but it's also dependent on the price within the category. For example, if you take our thing, if you're selling shoes which are sub 1,000 rupees, then your ROS can be as high as 3 or 4 also. If you are beyond 1,500 rupees or 2,000 rupees, then your ROS will be different. So ROS is also a function of price. It is also a function of aging. Aging means how well customer recognizes you. For example, the ROS that an incumbent brand, existing person who has already spent years of marketing, how much they are able to get and how much a new brand, which is 1 year into the market, will get, this will also change. I think that more than just CAC or ROS, I think for example, if ROS is high and if you don't invest, then again you won't be able to build the business. So I am of the opinion that it has to be always tied with scale, and it has to be always tied with product. For example, initially, if you are getting a poor ROS, sometimes you may get below 1. That means you are spending 1 rupee and you are getting less than 1 rupee. It's still okay, provided you see the trend in the right direction. The second thing is unit economics has lots of components. It has COGS, it has delivery, it has this thing. ROS is, or marketing is one component, and believe it or not, in the initial few years, that is going to be the highest. So instead of trying to focus on that, make sure that you are taking care of the conversion properly. You are not leaving any stone unturned in the unit economics of the rest of the chain, and the ROS is trending in the right direction. So if let's say first month you have 1, second month you are seeing 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, 1.92. So if this trend is proper, then you are in a good path. You are in a good place. So like if I tell a ratio that no, it should be above 3, then a lot of people who are going to start their brand will say this is bullshit. That's not the way. I think initially ROS is going to be high. Initially CAC is going to be high. Watch the trend, whether it is going down or not. Make sure that you are getting your unit economics right. So let's say at something you should have some kind of a forecast that let's say when it hits 1,000 shoes per month, at that time this ROS is going to look like 3 for me, or 2.8 for me. So then that's the right metric to try. So that's the right way to go about solving this problem. I hope whoever asked this question got the sense of it.
Yes, I think it makes a lot of sense to me as well. And like one last question that I have is like if you can share some piece of advice for the entrepreneurs out there on running the business and anything you would like to share.
Running the business, I think 2-3 advices I will tell you. One is that please do something that you really like, because like in my case I love shoes. So when the chips are down and when it's like tough times, then since it is your it's something that drives you, it will allow you to stay afloat. Second advice I would say is that find a good co-founder, somebody who you really trust very well, with whom you can vibe. Believe me, entrepreneurial journey is a tough task. There are going to be highs and lows. So it's like if you have some co-founders or co-founder, then when you are like really down in the dumps, then you will have somebody to talk to, and they can sort of pull you up or they can energize you. So that's another piece of the advice. The third thing, or the most important thing, is that focus on the product. If your product is right, I think that one way or the other you will find a way to tell it to the customers. Customers themselves will tell each other. And like I said, successful businesses are the ones which have low CACs. I think that's about it. That's what comes to my mind right now.
Sounds good. I think with this, I think we can wrap this session. And I would like to thank you, thanks Utkarsh for joining us today and taking out some time and giving us some wonderful tips and tricks in order to run how we can run a D2C business. And thank you all for attending the session today. And hopefully we'll be coming up with another session covering some new things about the D2C brands, like how we can set up a D2C brand and how we can grow. And we'll keep you posted. And thank you, Utkarsh, once again. And
thanks, Gaurav, for having me. Thanks, Gaurav, for having me here. I think one of the great things people from startups do is to try and help other startups. So I think when we started, also a lot of people used to help us just because we were doing something cool. So we really love that you are taking the time to sort of invite people and spend some time to sort of help other brands grow, or new entrepreneurs take shape. So thank you so much for having me here. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words. And goodbye, everyone. Have a great day and stay safe. Bye.